It's great to welcome to the program today Margot Finn, who teaches in the Applied Liberal Arts Initiative at the University of Michigan and wrote a book titled Discriminating Taste: How Class Anxiety Created the Food Revolution. Margot, so great to have you on today.
Thanks for having me.
So this is super interesting to me for a number of different reasons, including that because of my background, I sort of have lived in a number of different food cultures and have read a lot about conspicuous consumption and the different ways in which sometimes people choose to display either sort of cultural knowledge or in some cases monetary status. So let's go back a little bit. At what point did there start to be sort of multiple food cultures that started to correlate with some class elements of society as well?
That's a great question. I think that there's probably been a relationship between how people eat and their social class, as long as there's been social classes. And perhaps even before there were, the kinds of groupings that we would recognize as social classes today, food has always been associated with power and hierarchy and how you express your identity. So it's not like there was a moment where all of a sudden people started performing class through food. Food has always been a way that we express who we are in relation to other people. So it's always been available as that vocabulary to express class, if that
What
makes
are
sense.
some of the examples about a belief about food that results from or connects to economic anxieties or concerns?
Um, well, let me see if I can think of a contemporary example. So one that I sometimes use is the affinity for kale, which we tend to recognize right now as something that's sort of a symbol of the alternative food movement. It's seen as something that's healthy and virtuous, maybe not that delicious, although you've got people who will advertise that they've got a great massaged kale salad or something like that. But the way people are talking about kale, it's got this weird symbolic power. To like kale means something about you. And people are using that, I think, sometimes to express that they have this interest in health, interest in sustainability. But it's also going along with a certain food culture that we do associate with the upper class right now. So to advertise the way people do on T-shirts and shopping bags that, like Kale to the Victors is one that you see in Michigan. Is a way of trying to express that you're part of this elite food community or that you have these concerns that are true of the elite food community.
That's interesting because so there's this idea. So kale is a good example in the sense that you said that very clearly kale is associated with certain economics, but it's not totally clear that kale tastes that good. And there's sort of a question mark around whether it actually does or doesn't taste good. Is there a divide in terms of whether the sort of more, whatever we would call them, more elevated foods economically are actually better tasting foods? And is it really just a matter of preference? Can we even assess that in any kind of empirical way?
I don't know if there's any such thing as like an empirically good tasting food because we eat food, but we eat food with stories. And the stories that we tell food tell us whether or not. So we could say that, yes, there's maybe an innate preference for sweetness, but you'll also get, and this is, I think, more true among the upper class, a real sense that too sweet is not good. It's infantile or like generally disliked. I don't like super sweet things, right? Because I've been either taught that I'm not supposed to, or I've acquired different tastes. So what I think happens is that people get motivated to like different things or motivated to try different things. So I'm not saying that like rich people are pretending to like kale. I think that they may have had more of an incentive to develop an affinity for it, to try that massaged kale salad and find out that if you eat it enough times or if you think of it in a certain way, yeah, you might really like it. I don't think they're faking that they like kale. I think that there are reasons that they like kale that are connected to what it might say about them and not have anything to do with its health or what it actually tastes like. I
Yeah,
think that
I mean, I wonder how much of this has to do with the preferences that are sort of instilled at a young age in this sense, which is that we know that the foods that are cheapest per calorie are often foods that contain subsidized ingredients, corn being one example. So when you look at the products that have, for example, a lot of high fructose corn syrup and are cheaper per calorie, or some of these other products, it seems as though if for economic reasons at a young age, those are the foods that one becomes accustomed to, that probably has a big role to play later on in life in terms of preferences.
I think that there is a sense that people have an affinity for the foods that they ate as kids, that you get used to certain tastes. But I'd be wary of oversimplifying that narrative. I think that that's actually a story that we like to tell about poor people, right? They can only they eat this junky food because they can only afford this junky food, and they're
Mm,
making an economically rational choice to get the cheap calories, and then that's all they know how to like and eat. And I don't buy any part of that narrative. I think
interesting.
everybody eats junk food, people of all social classes, particularly as kids. Um, and that doesn't mean that people eat that way their whole lives. Many people's eating preferences transform. So the rich people who are eating kale right now, as adults mostly, I don't think grew up eating kale as children. I don't think that they were given their kale, in the 1950s, 1970s, whenever they grew up. That just wasn't a part of the food culture in the same way, and certainly there wasn't a sense in the 70s that we need to feed kids kale to do this taste education that people will talk about now. And yet, many of those people grew into adults who really love their massaged kale salads. So people do change their tastes over time, right?
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I guess the question would be whether the tastes might change for more people were they not maybe constrained by economic factors when maybe some people's preferences start changing. But I guess it could be some part of all of these anecdotally or to some degree. I guess I'm not sure. I'm thinking out loud here.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's interesting is because food does so many different things and taste does so many different things that we can say these things that have a certain truth to them, right? Like people like familiar flavors. Oh, that's true. But people also like novel flavors, right? So people seek foods that are comforting, that they grew up with, but they also seek foods that are adventurous and new to explore new things. So I think, so when we tell these stories about why do people like the things they like, one thing that we have to be careful about is falling in. There's very easy narratives, but they can also conflict, right? Just like the idea that we're all eating better, we know so much more information. And on the other hand, oh, we're eating junk and it's crap and our food system has been terrible. Those both can't be true. It can't be everything is getting better, we're learning more, and also somehow we're forgetting all of our ancestral wisdom. Like those don't both get to be true.
Well, it could be economically stratified, right? Where you see a larger and larger divide between, I mean, that's in a sense what you're talking about when you talk about the appeal of kale to certain people, but not everybody. We could simultaneously have more information about what's good to eat and growing numbers of people who are suffering from obesity and food related illness because of inequality.
Some of the assumptions people make about obesity and how it correlates with social class, it's really complicated. So it's true that among white women, rich white women are much thinner than poor white women. But it's not as true if you look across race divides and if you look across gender divides. So among Latino men and Black men, the wealthier you are, the more likely you are to be obese.
Interesting.
And it's I forget what the relationship is with Black women. I believe that richer Black women are thinner, but it's maybe not statistically significant in any case. So it's not the case that just poor people are fatter. There's some real differences in how those demographics are changing. And it's not even clear that people are getting so much fatter. People have gotten fatter somewhat in the last 40 to 60 years, depending on how you're counting. But it's not a huge amount. It's not everybody. And it's certainly not just the poor. So is it that poor people are eating junk food and getting fatter and fatter while rich people are learning more about food and eating better and better? I don't actually think either of those things are true. And when we look at things like who eats fast food, it's everybody, right? Across the income spectrum, about everybody eats about one fast food meal a week. It's not like it's the poor people eating fast food and the rich people aren't.
Where do specialty diets fit into this? And that could be specialty diets that, I mean, I guess we could categorize them a few different ways. You would have some that, whether they are for health reasons or for other reasons, or a mix, kind of depends. But we're talking about everything from veganism and vegetarianism, gluten-free, which is increasingly popular, paleo. There are now some prominent people who have tried the carnivore diet, and different versions of that, fruitarianism, ketogenic diets. Are those, my instinct is, and I'm glad that you're pushing back against sometimes what seems obvious is not true. My instinct is that there is a certain degree of privilege associated with some of those choices. Where does that fit into the conversation that we're having?
Well, I think you're right. I think that at least there's a cultural sense that these are the kinds of diets that it takes a kind of privilege to pursue. Many of them involve eating foods that are more expensive, especially if you're talking about paleo, low carb. Those are the meat centric diets. It's really hard to do that cheaply.
Mm.
So I think you do have to have a certain kind of economic privilege and also maybe access to knowledge. And more than that, I think even access to the kinds of cultural rewards. So I think some people are really rewarded for trying new diets and for aspiring to different things, whether it's health or ethics through their diet. And I think for some people, the incentives and the rewards aren't there, right? In some communities, to eat vegan is not going to be rewarded. It's not going to be seen as an admirable choice. It's going to be seen as weird or antisocial or fussy or picky or bizarre. And those things aren't going to be, so you're not going to be as likely to try it if that's the way your community is going to see it, and if that's the way people are going to react to you, as if people are going to react with like, oh, you look great, and oh, that's so good for you, and oh, I couldn't do that, like just a different kind of reaction that people get for those diets.
So you mentioned the fast food element, that there are wealthy people, middle class people, poor people, and generally speaking, the amount of fast food consumption seems to be similar. How do we explain the positioning of fast food across the economic spectrum? When Donald Trump was running for president, there was a lot made of he's having buckets of KFC on his private plane. He loves his taco bowls and he loves Hispanics. I mean, that was a whole other fiasco that we could talk about. But in any case, the taco, regardless of his feeling about Hispanic people, the Trump Tower taco bowl was really great. Where does the fast food element fit in culturally and economically?
I mean, I think fast food does have a different meaning for people depending on where you're located. So it is true that when poorer people eat out, they are more likely to eat at a fast food restaurant because full service restaurants are more expensive. But they're not necessarily going to be eating fast food a whole lot because fast food isn't that cheap, right? The average fast food meal costs about $7, and the average meal cooked and eaten at home costs between $2 to $4. So it is true that poor and working class people eat more meals cooked at home because they can't afford to eat out, even at fast food restaurants. If they do eat out, they're more likely to eat at a fast food restaurant than a full service restaurant, right? So richer people have this option of fast food restaurants and more elaborate restaurants. And when they choose fast food, they're not choosing, to go eat a meal out. They're choosing the quick, convenient thing. That's often true for poor people too, whereas they have the option of the nicer restaurant meal as well.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I mean, so when I lived in New York City, I would sometimes walk by Olive Garden and it was packed. And Olive Garden in New York City is not universally less expensive than an actual local Italian restaurant. And I remember at the time really giving some thought to that and imagining, well, maybe there's tourists who know Olive Garden and they don't know what's a reliable local Italian place. Like there has to be more than just the economics of it when the price seems to be relatively similar. I wonder what you would make of that.
Well, yeah, there's all kinds of things going on, right? Who thinks that the hole in the wall or family owned or authentic Italian restaurant is definitely superior, right? What class of people is going to think that that even if, in fact, sometimes a lower price at a family restaurant is going to signal to them authenticity and perhaps the promise of better tasting food than Olive Garden, which is a chain, and because it's mass produced, is sort of inherently barred from having authentic credibility.
Right.
So there's just, I do think that it's the story and what's going to appeal to different people in the story is familiarity. And maybe, I mean, a lot of people love Olive Garden, right? Like the free or the endless breadsticks and the salad and the soup, like it's good food and you know what you're going to get. And it's the same thing every time. There are some people who that's going to appeal to. And I do think that there are class dynamics to that, to whether or not you value familiarity and reliability and something that's going to be pleasing to you and your whole family, or whether or not you value having an adventure, trying something new, doing something that might be authentic and exotic, that might expose you to some other kinds of people that you then can return to your safe life, but you had, some adventurous experience. These are, in some ways, maybe they're personality things, right? It's not that there aren't people who are adventurous eaters, even if they have extremely, limited means. But it does mean that there's just different rewards that are going to motivate different people. And it's not clear to me that it's the rich people doing all of the good things and the poor people doing terrible things, right? I think
Certainly.
It's different stories.
Are diets within the same culture right now? Obviously, if we can compare the average Japanese diet to the average Kenyan diet, they will be very, very different. But within countries, within cultures, is the range of diets way more disparate now than it was in times past, or is that not necessarily the case?
That's a good question. It's a big question. I think it depends on what you're talking about, right? Like there's been military conquest and globalization, global encounters that have changed how people eat for a long time. And whether there's homogeneity within countries or empires depends on the moment, depends on how many people are being grouped together, how big the country is. I think with the more rapid movement of people and foods and ideas, you may get more diversity within some places. But on the other hand, you'll hear people talking about the industrialization of food, and maybe that's sort of flattened out the way some food cultures look, or made things more homogenous. There's kind of so many moving parts. It's a hard question to answer. It's a good question.
We've been speaking with Margot Finn, who teaches in the Applied Liberal Arts Initiative at the University of Michigan. The book is called Discriminating Taste: How Class Anxiety Created the Food Revolution. Margot, really appreciate your time and super interesting stuff.
Thanks so much for having me.